Hey there. Well, anybody who thought that the United States was withdrawing from the world certainly got a kick in the pants this past Wednesday evening. In a joint announcement with the United Kingdom and Australia, Joe Biden announced the most concrete anti-China move of the new Cold War. This blows anything Obama or Trump did out of the water. There's a lot to discuss here, and it all reveals the shape of the world to come. To be clear, I think this is the worst thing the U.S. government has done in this century. And yes, that means that I think this is even worse than the invasion of Iraq. Let's dive in. I spent a lot of time mocking U.S. military equipment, specifically aircraft carriers and manned fighter jets, which are just glorified multi-billion-dollar targets for cheap Chinese missiles, unlikely to survive the 15th minute of World War III. I do not make fun of nuclear-powered submarines. These things are nasty and quiet, and they operate under the sea. Nobody can predict the next war, least of all me, but these vessels are likely to be the deciding factor. These monsters are terror weapons, providing the ability to eradicate your enemy's cities, even if your own country lies in ruins. The subs only need to be refueled every 6 or 7 years, and they can stay under the surface of the sea for months on end. The AUKUS agreement is a lot like when Pakistan provided nuclear technology to North Korea, except with massively larger and much more destabilizing consequences. These weapons are so nasty that before last week, only 6 of the world's nuclear powers had them, and these were the biggest and most powerful of the nuclear powers. Australia's Prime Minister swears up and down that his nuclear-powered submarines will never actually carry nuclear weapons. That could even be true, but don't expect China to believe that. Quick sidebar. Thanks to the AUKUS agreement, Australia will no longer have to worry about the on-the-beach scenario, where the rest of the world dies in a nuclear apocalypse and Down Under has to mope about for a few months waiting for the fallout to arrive. AUKUS sends Melbourne and Sydney to the top of the kill list. Congratulations! Whether Australia's nuke subs carry nuclear weapons or not, the AUKUS agreement is expected to include Australian bases for U.S. submarines that are nuclear-propelled and nuclear-armed. If Australia did put nuclear weapons on its nuclear-powered submarines, that would be an egregious violation of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Even if that doesn't happen, though, AUKUS violates the spirit, if not the law, of non-proliferation. Australia's nuclear subs will need highly enriched fuel. In case you were wondering, yep, that's exactly the issue we've been starving the Iranian people to death over for the past 3 years. And unlike the Iranian issue, there is no plausible civilian use for nuclear submarine fuel. The increase in volume we're talking about here is extreme. The Bulletin of Nuclear Scientists has pointed out that the entire Iran conflict is over something like 25 kilograms of highly enriched uranium. Australian nuclear subs will involve literally tons of this stuff in a new country that has next to no experience securely handling military-grade nuclear material. Has the Biden administration even bothered to justify this? Not really. They just sort of claim it's an exception and they move on. The way I see it, there are multiple levels to geopolitical discussion. There is the day-to-day competition between nation-states that makes up most of what we discuss on this channel. Whether it's diplomacy, terrorism, or even a war that costs hundreds of thousands of lives, it's all serious stuff, but at the end of the day, it's temporary. Yemen, Syria, and Iraq will eventually find peace, recover, and rebuild. Nuclear proliferation operates on a different plane. These eggs do not get unbroken. Nuclear proliferation is permanent, and any spread of military nuclear technology, no matter who does it or for what purpose, is a blow against the entire human race. This is why I have spent so much time talking about the Iran nuclear deal, and why the people who broke it in 2018 over missiles or support for militias are such dangerous idiots. I don't mention it enough, but the scariest thing about the 2014 crack-up between Russia and the United States isn't Ukraine or Syria or the Baltics. It's the fact that it makes the spread of nuclear materials much more likely. And that's exactly what this new AUKUS agreement does. It spreads nuclear material. The intentional proliferation that the United States announced last week is something that has only happened once before. Back in 1958, shortly after the Soviet Union launched humankind's first satellite, a terrified United States shared our nuclear technology with the United Kingdom, our closest ally. In the decades since, even during the Cold War, the United States would intervene diplomatically to keep anybody, even our allies, from sharing this technology. Is 2021 really as dangerous a year as 1958 was? Is China really as much of a threat as the Soviet Union was in the era of Sputnik? This move by the US has made it painfully obvious that China is ruled by idiots. Their choice to meet Donald Trump's bluster with bluster of their own has backfired massively. China thought they could bully little Australia with wolf warrior diplomacy, but it's now clear that they were bringing tariffs to a nuke fight. It's unclear how China can respond to this. I mean, I guess they could give nuclear submarines to Iran, but that strikes me as pretty unlikely. But the fact that China stands revealed as overreaching and outmatched makes the US and Australian actions look very disproportionate. Just because a weak kid at school is a wannabe bully and a loudmouth doesn't make it okay to burn down his neighborhood. And I think that may be exactly what we're doing here. This is likely to launch an entirely one-sided arms race within Asia. Australia is a very rich country, but it's also a small one, thousands of miles away from China. If US policy is that Australia deserves a nuclear sub because of trade issues and China talking a little shit, what's our message to Japan, Vietnam, and the Philippines? These countries have populations 4 to 5 times Australia's, and they all have active territorial disputes with China. South Korea isn't much bigger than Australia, but it certainly has a much more active military threat to the north. Doesn't it deserve a nuclear submarine too? None of these countries will insist on having these doomsday weapons immediately, of course. For one thing, they are ruinously expensive. But over the course of decades, whether it's in response to a particular incident or just the standard workings of nationalism and the US military-industrial complex, all of these countries are now very likely to end up with these weapons as well. Sure, it'd be nice if the US continued to take a principled stand against proliferation, but the time for that was before AUKUS became a reality last week. After staying mostly steady for half a century, the number of powers with nuclear submarines could double in the next few decades. Maybe a few of those powers will honor their commitments and not take the easy jump from enriching uranium for fuel to enriching for nuclear weapons. But that's not really how human nature works, is it? The Biden administration is opening Pandora's box here, and the evil that could stem from it could be immeasurable. The parallel to the invasion of Iraq I mentioned earlier may not be intuitive, but honestly, it feels a lot like 2003 this week. This is a tremendously momentous decision, but even fewer people are speaking up against it than spoke out about the Iraq War back in 2003. The Iraq invasion has killed 1 million people and counting. Turning Southeast Asian politics nuclear will be impossible to take back, and maybe next year, or maybe next century, it has a very good chance of killing billions. AUKUS is the start of the next phase of human political history, and people are paying way too little attention. The AUKUS agreement answers a lot of very important questions, like, are we really going to do a new Cold War with China? Well, yes, absolutely. Are we going to do so in the most damaging way possible by focusing on ridiculously expensive weapons systems instead of worthwhile scientific competition? Yep, that's what we're doing too. And are we going to be dumb enough to create an Asian NATO, a complex of military-industrial complexes with thousands of bureaucrats and businessmen who will dedicate their careers to keeping tensions as high as possible? Yep, we are now definitely doing that for sure as well. And the most insane thing is that we are doing all this to confront a Chinese adversary that is manifestly not ready for prime time. So far, their main retaliation to the AUKUS agreement has been an attempt to join a trade agreement that the United States wrote and then abandoned. Of course, the fact that China is vastly weaker than advertised will be taken as a sign that the AUKUS agreement is working and that our insane aggression wasn't just wise, it's been successful. This is exactly the same argument that has been used to justify the war on terror fraud in recent months. It's all very depressing. What we are seeing here is the swinging shut of something I like to call the real Thucydides trap. Not that nonsense that Harvard was pushing a number of years back, but a concept that comes from real engagement with what Thucydides wrote. I described it last year. 2,500 years ago, the Greek world faced an existential threat. The Persians wanted to swallow it whole, both with overwhelming force and with an ideology of submission that the Greeks found repellent. The movie 300 has cemented the idea that beating Persia was all about the Spartans, but in truth, the Athenians were probably more than equal partners in this. Like the Russians against the Nazis in World War II, or the Chinese against the Soviets if the Cold War had turned hot, the Spartans provided indispensable land armies. But it was Athens that provided the logistics, the navy, the wealth, and the diplomacy that tied all the other Greek city-states together. The United States sounds a lot more like Athens than Sparta to me. Like the Allies in World War II or the US-led bloc in the Cold War, the Greeks ended the Persian threat to their lands with a series of battles you may have heard of. What Thucydides documents is what happened after Marathon and Salamis. You see, Athens got to like the league of city-states that it had put together to fight Persia and the profits that it brought. Long after the Persian threat had faded, Athens continued to get progressively harsher and harsher in the ways that it punished Greek political units that stepped out of line. The Athens-led alliance had become the Athenian Empire. Does that sound at all familiar to you? Like the Athenians, the US got so used to leading a fight that they refused to stop leading after the fight was over. Everything from the war on terror to big tech dominance is a sign of US alliance calcifying into US empire. I expected the rest of the world to push back against this a long time ago, but they just keep not doing that. I think the AUKUS agreement is a sign that things are going to get a lot worse before they get any better. Washington, D.C. has had a disturbingly easy time swapping in a Chinese boogeyman to replace the fading fear of radical Islamic terrorism. Over the past week, France has been the only country objecting to this striking bit of US-UK nuclear proliferation. But it's not doing so on anything like principled grounds. France's hissy fit is actually very instructive. A couple days back, France actually recalled its ambassadors from the US and Australia. Did they recall their ambassadors over the Obama administration's fostering of a refugee crisis that shattered the European Union? No, they did not. Did they recall their ambassadors over the Trump administration's breaking of the massively multilateral Iran nuclear deal that France was very invested in? Nope, they did not. Did they recall their ambassadors over the extremely unfair U.S. ban on European nationals over COVID that only ended this week? No, they did not. What prompted France to finally recall its ambassadors was the canceling of its own deal to sell submarines to Australia. It's easy to mock the French for this, but I think they should be applauded for revealing the true grubby, pointless stakes of NATO and Indo-Pacific high politics. It's a lot like the fact that the United States only lost patience with Turkey when it tried to buy Russian missiles. Our governments act as if there are no real stakes in geopolitics anymore, other than the greed of defense companies and the politicians they own. Of course, France is more angry at the United States than it has been for decades, because nothing matters more to the world's leaders than defense spending. Thanks to the collapse of the Evergrande real estate empire, there is a not large but a real chance that the Chinese Communist Party will implode just as the United States throws out all of the principles of nuclear non-proliferation to confront it. It's kind of stunning. I honestly don't know whether to laugh or cry. The AUKUS agreement is a heartbreakingly stupid move. Thanks for watching, and come back for Thursday's live chat, where we will talk about the weird racist aspects of the rebirth of English-speaking empire that is AUKUS.